remedy will take a few days to prepare.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
Kayan, your ailments are more complicated.
No one has ever doubted that the Tree of Life is a mystical realm apart from the Pride Lands, a safe haven for rescued animals from all corners of the globe. When Kion and his guard needed to travel there for healing, that's when we first see it. I couldn't help but wonder if the snowy mountains they passed through on their journey were the ones from the latest Mufasa film. They saw so many new areas. If this is correct, then the Tree of Life and Obasi's Shade Tree are probably one and the same. On the other hand, these icy peaks are not the sole rationale behind my belief that the Tree of Life might serve as the shade tree for Obasi. In light of Kira's words just before he attacked Obasi, everything falls into place. However, in order for you to grasp the concept better, let's examine everything that is known about the Tree of Life before we go. The story of the Tree of Life begins when Rafiki tells Ono and Kion that it is the only place they can find healing. They were accompanied by the remaining guards and traveled a considerable distance to locate it. When they finally met, there were several predators, and when they did come, things still didn't go according to plan, since this is where we encountered the Night Pride, who guard the Tree of Life. Kion and his guard overcame several obstacles before they were allowed entry, and they were able to find healing in the end. The healing of Ono gives us a glimpse of the Tree of Life's mystical powers. Because it was believed that the Tree of Life could aid animals, unusual creatures would travel from far and wide to visit it. Meanwhile, Eden's Tree of Life had to. Probably spent a considerable amount of time there because of all the Royal Ungus's paintings. Also, meeting Rafiki at the Tree of Life during her earlier years meant that this wasn't Makini's first trip there. Let me explain what I mean by all of this. That this tree has obviously been around for quite some time. One of the reasons the Shade Tree eventually became the Tree of Life is because of this. Reason being that just before attacking Obasi, Kiros remarks that the pride of an emperor is the last pride that resides in the kingdom's sacred valley. Once his pride is gone, he informs Obasi all that the light touches is his, including Obasi's shade tree in that. He continues. During Kiros's famous farewell song, he criticizes Obasi for being too sluggish, fearless, out of shape, lying in the shade. Kira would never stand for anything like this, and we all know it. He is a cold-blooded assassin who kills everything that gets in his way because he thinks he is the real deal, therefore referring to his new residence as a way Obasi did under a shade tree. After he slashed Obasi's pride, Kiros took everything that the light touched, and a new life was beginning under this tree. His choice to rename the tree from Shade Tree to Tree of Life doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. How, though, did this tree acquire its mystical abilities if it is, in fact, the Tree of Life? Furthermore, how was Queen Janna transported there? After he destroyed Obasi's pride, Kiros obviously didn't remain at the Tree of Life. He sought for Taka and Mufasa to get retribution. Passing of his kid. Therefore, the Tree of Life was deserted after Kiros's departure. I don't get how Janna got there though. I believe Kiros was involved in some way with that, since we are aware that Kios's band, the Outsiders, had assaulted more than just Obasi's pride, for the reason that Sarabi mentions that the Outsiders are to blame for her loss of pride when Taka and Mufasa encounter her and Zazu. Upon arrival to Mel, additional lionesses confirmed that they too had been ambushed by the individuals who are not part of the group. The fact that Karaos and his pride are unbridled tells us that they would assault any pride that is in their way. I don't care if Kiros also shattered Janna's pride. Janna may have also called the Valley of Kings her home. Janna and a few others managed to escape Kiros's onslaught, but many others, including Ronnie and Balio's parents, were not so fortunate. Because if they had always resided near the Tree of Life, as we know from the Lion Guard, this would also explain how their parents perished. Might have used some assistance had they been in danger. Consequently, the lions fled after Janna suffered a heavy loss to her pride. Janna, who had always been an incredibly astute leader, followed the wind directions until they arrived at the site of the Shade Tree, which had transformed into the Tree of Life. By this point, Karaos and his crew had already departed. Janna made the decision to start a new life there. She followed the wind whispers and began building a new house for herself and her son Surok inside the tree. Despite relocating to a new home, they were still far from enjoying a tranquil existence. Reason being, Janna Janna, Sur, and the handful of lions that managed to escape the onslaught were still in the process of healing. Raising 2 cubs, Baleo and Ronnie, without their parents was a devastating blow to their pride and family. However, an unusual occurrence began. Sorok, who had sustained serious injuries while evading the invaders, started to recover at a far quicker rate than anticipated, and soon after that they started to take note. There was also a shift in the terrain surrounding the tree. More food was available, and the grass appeared to be becoming green. All of a sudden, the tree began to seem more vibrant. At this point, the tree's mystical abilities likely began to manifest for the first time. Because they could never bear to see any other animal suffer the same pain they had, they began to accept any animal in need of treatment. However, I believe the shade tree may also be the tree of life for another reason. Keep your eyes peeled because we are about to delve thoroughly. Anyone who has seen Lion Guard knows that a Scary found the sound of the sage's roar near the tree of life at Chica Escarpment. Plus, there's this amazing statement Vitani says towards the conclusion of the Lion Guard when she creates her guard. Being the sister of the future king, she claimed gave her the authority to lead the Lion Guard. It seems she believes that being linked to the royal family is a prerequisite for being the head of the guard. However, it wasn't her job to hear the shout of the wise men who had served the great monarchs of yesteryear. It was only because Kion chose to give it to her that she obtained it. Due to the fact that Kovu was not actually a member of the royal family, she likely would not have been able to obtain it otherwise. The fact that Kion is Simba's son proves that he is the rightful monarch. We already know that Scar, also known as Taka, was the Lion Guard leader prior to Kion, so let's go even farther into this. But Scar lost control of it when he turned it into an evil growl. The great monarchs of old likely detected Scar's animosity and transferred it to Mufasa's descendants. Now, I believe that Scar and Mufasa are actually brothers in the Lion Guard universe, which simplifies my idea significantly. I believe they were near enough for the great monarchs of old to determine it was best to pass it on to Mufasa's lineage, even if you don't believe it. This establishes a family connection between Kion and the former Lion Guard chief, who may or may not be the pretext for his selection to bear the Elder's Roar. Although Scar possessed the gift of the Elder's Roar and served as head of the Lion Guard, the identity of his predecessor remains a mystery. As I mentioned earlier, Scar hasn't spent his entire existence in the Pride Lands, as is well known. Both the live-action and Lion Guard adaptations share this, in my opinion. Hence, the Lion Guard's commander should ideally hail from Scar's hometown, where he resided during his youth. Standing before him, perhaps a lion in the vicinity of the Shade Tree, the Tree of Life, according to my theory, in the Valley of Kings. Because of this, we now know how the roar made its way to the Pride Lands and why Ascari found it so distant from there. The only way this makes sense is if the Tree of Life is actually Obasi's shade tree. I will summarize it again because I realize this was a deep theory. His lineage persisted even after he died, and the Lion's Pride found new leaders. A guard was established. Ascari had inhabited in the Chica Escarpment area, which is known to us. Thus, that is likely the place where his lineage persisted until it was passed down to one of Taka's, Scar's, ancestors. After Karas eliminated Scar's whole family, the only survivor of the royal line was Scar herself. Then the gift of roaring would be his. Now we know that the roar made its way to the Pride Lands via the Shade Tree, which is likely the Tree of Life. This may have been another motivation for Rafiki's visit to the Tree of Life. Prior to this, as it is revealed in the Lion Guard that Rafiki first encountered his apprentice Machini at the Tree of Life during her youth. He knew she would become the next royal Miyuzi the second he laid eyes on her. The wind whispered it to him. And how on earth could Rafiki know the way there? Then it's easy. If the Tree of Life had been Obasi's shade tree, his brother Mufasa could have simply shown him the way. Queen Janna was presumably already at the Tree of Life when Rafiki and Makini met there, suggesting that she was someone who arrived after Kira's departed, and that's hardly all. In her famous speech, Queen Janna declared, "The roar, it has finally returned." This takes on new significance since it raises the possibility that the roar heard near the Tree of Life was caused by more than just a scary. The artwork on Queen Janna's wall taught her a lot about roaring. I was pleased to see it make a comeback. Queen Janna didn't notice the roar remain at the Tree of Life until after she severed her ties to the Circle of Life. What will happen to the Tree of Life now that Kion has transferred his roar to Vitani? You may already be aware that Ascari restored Kion's roar so that he could aid in the defense of the Night Pride. Queen Rani's coronation brought Kion immense joy, and with that, the Lion Guard came to a close. The Tree of Life will continue to exist though, so if you're interested in that topic, you should also watch my movie. Since Disney was too slack to make a 4th season of Lion Guard, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Crafted with my own hands. You know, I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on the Tree of Life before you watch that film. Where Kion and his companions traversed the snowy mountains, were they identical to those over which Taka betrayed his brother? Did anyone else but Queen Janna discover the Tree of Life's magic powers? Is it possible that the Tree of Life is truly the shade tree that Obasi has? Post your thoughts in the space provided, so you don't miss a thing. Make sure you click that bell. Video from the new collection, and until then, see you later.